Now, I have a question. Are you listening?
Yes, Mum.
Good. Now, what is a song?
A song is a dream.
And?
A place to be.
A song is a place to be.
Coming up next, we have a provocative and moving conversation with the stars of the acclaimed new Broadway drama, The Hills of California. And then co-creators Michael R. Jackson and Anna K. Jacobs join us to discuss their daring new off-Broadway musical, Teeth. Hello, I'm Patrick Pacheco. Welcome to Theater All the Moving Parts. In this new episode, we explore works inspired by ancient myth, folklore, and melodrama. We begin with the cast of the acclaimed Broadway hit, The Hills of California. Laura Donnelly, Ophelia Lovibond, Helena Wilson, and Leanne Best join us for a lively discussion about what one of them calls Greek tragedy in a kitchen. Then Tony-winning playwright Michael R. Jackson and composer Anna K. Jacobs speak about borrowing from a cult horror film and the age-old mythical tale of vagina dentata for their harrowing but funny new off-Broadway musical, Teeth. Welcome, Laura. Welcome, Leanne. Welcome, Helena, and welcome, Ophelia. And congratulations on an astonishing production in which you lead a terrific ensemble of actors.
The Seaview Luxury Guest House and Spa, just around the corner from this cinema. Turn left.
I promised Mum. I promised her Joan would be here.
I was always jealous of you.
All I can tell you, it's in God's hands now.
The Seaview Luxury Guest House and Spa presents The Webb Sisters.
We should probably start by saying that the play is set in a rickety Blackpool guest house and toggles between 1976, as the Webb sisters gather for the death vigil of their mother, Veronica, and 1955, during which a young and ferocious Veronica
Gloria, stop dead on the second tee of stat.
struggles to shape your teenage selves into a singing quartet in the mode of the Andrews sisters.
The Andrews sisters, Maxine, Patricia, and Laverne, faced many, many obstacles. Gillian.
They were born into poverty in Minnesota.
Ruby.
They had to practice in the back of their father's butte between the shows. The shows were sometimes 300 miles apart, and when they got there,
The shows were sometimes cancelled because it was
The Great Depression.
the Great Depression of 1929.
I want to start by asking each of you, as you gathered and first read the play, what struck you about the character that you were about to embark on? Why don't we start with you, Ophelia?
I loved the play as soon as I read it. It just leapt off the page. It was so vivid. Ruby, I felt like I knew exactly who she was. I completely understood her motivations and why she would respond to something in a certain way. It didn't evade me, her behavior or her decisions.
You're reunited with your sisters after a period of time. What are some of those past memories that hit you?
Well, Ruby's not afraid of the past. She kind of finds solace in it. So some of the memories, the primary memories, they're of Joan, of growing up with Joan and how she sort of idolised her. And even in her absence, in her long 20-year absence, Ruby's continued to mythologise her, and she's continued to occupy a space as her sister.
As you mentioned, Joan has been estranged from the family for about 2 decades. She's the one that has gone off from this place to the hills of California and left the three of you behind. Jill, you've been in this guest house all the time, taking care of Veronica. How do you view it? How did you view the character when you first read her?
Well, I think that was the thing that most appealed to me. I think the idea of playing somebody who has sort of like a kind of lighthouse or something, just been there the whole time and seen all these seasons and years kind of come and go. And what I also found interesting was how those people, when they're in that situation, they can't see it from the outside, and it's only when other people come in to the house that they show Jill who she is, and she has to really kind of reckon with her situation in a way that I think when you're busy being a caregiver, you don't have time or capacity to do. So that kind of appealed to me.
And of the three sisters, you are the one that's most protective of Joan.
Yeah.
As they dump on her
Yeah.
from time to time.
Yeah, and I think that's because, without giving too much away, Jill's primary concern is their mother, Veronica, and what will happen to Veronica's immortal soul, not in a particularly religious way, but what will happen to her after she dies, and will there be any kind of spiritual reckoning for her given what took place in the family when they were younger. And I think she has information about that and deep held concerns about that mean that her goal, whatever the others say, is to get Joan into the room and up the stairs to see their mother.
But it's not silly Jilly head in the clouds, nor sticking up for no one. I know me sister. If Joan says she's coming, she's coming. There, I've said it.
Well, she'd better get a wiggle on.
Leanne, your Gloria comes into the guest house like a force of nature with a big chip on her shoulder. What's on her mind as she returns and reunites with her sisters on this occasion?
Yeah, well, I think you say on this occasion, it was one of the conversations that we had a lot in rehearsal. As when the band disbanded, they didn't ever really stay in touch. Joan left, and it was the end of all of their sort of relationships together. So Gloria hasn't been there for at least 10 years, but she does that very audacious thing that people with very loud feelings do.
Just thanks. Thanks for the backup. It's nice to know you can trust.
She's come in and decided that she is the moral compass of the situation and that she will navigate it on everybody's behalf. I think that, like, female rage is something that, you know, when we see it portrayed, or if we see it portrayed, people get a little bit kind of squeamish around. And what I love about Gloria is she's so embodied in it, she's so full of it, that the play doesn't shy away from that, but neither do her sisters. There is no sort of cowering under the table from the other women. They know how to relate to this robust, you know, energy that she brings with her. But of course, as the play goes on, we find out that, you know, what's that old saying, that anger is very often the shield over which you put it over the wound. And as the play goes on, the shield comes down and we start to see where this fury is coming from. And like everybody, I think she has a broken heart.
The Seaview Luxury Guest House and Spa, just around the corner from this cinema. Turn left at the tower, 100 yards approx. We call the television and our own jukebox.
Laura, you've been gifted with a dual role. We soon see you as Veronica once the play toggles between 1976 and the 1950s. In terms of Veronica, in the way that we meet you, what were the seeds of Veronica's ambitions for her daughter? Did you have to explore that when you first encountered the play and the role was written for you by Jez Butterworth, your partner both in life and professionally?
I remember when Jez was dreaming this play up, one of the first ideas he had around it was based in old Bible stories and Greek mythology about parents who sacrifice a child in order to please the gods, in order to gain safety, in order to gain a good harvest. I think that it was one that it's a drive that's based in wanting her children to be safe. And so what I began to think about with Veronica was, where does therefore that fear of the world come from, that she goes to such lengths to try and make sure that her children are safe, or that she believes that that is a way of keeping them safe. And I just considered the fact that she is a woman, a single mother in an era where that would be incredibly difficult. Not that it isn't now, but, you know, even more so then, when she wouldn't have had autonomy and you know, and the independence that she would need and would want. And at the same time, she's running a very complex business, and she has, in her lifetime, just been through 2 world wars that will have had a very profound effect on her, I think. You know, she's had a father or maybe several fathers of her children who have all died, or, you know, there's a question mark over how they all kind of came and went through those wars. And I think, therefore, that she sees fame for the girls, success for the girls, as being something that might lift them above anything that can harm them in the world. And so I really do think that it's an ambition that is driven from love rather than her own needing to live through them vicariously.
Look, I know how much you want your lassies to prosper.
Don't make me come over the... Prosper. Prosper. You want Prosper go work in a bank. I want them to live. To soar, not dragged down by St. Bartholomew's or you or anyone. My girls are the Webbs. And the Webbs aren't 10 a penny. They only made one lot and they are here. They are right here.
And she's also driven by the fact of what society imposes on women in those days. How does where that societal impositions affect how you view your character?
She's making herself like a man to be respected, because as a woman she will not get that. So she apes typically stereotypical masculine qualities of picking people up and dropping them and putting them down and making sure that she's got the status in order to feel safe, in order so that she will not have that happen to her again. And I think that's done her a service and a disservice. It's protected her, but it's also made her frightened of her own feelings. So she's that kind of toxicity, that discomfort with her own emotions means that they explode in a way that she can't control them, which she's an example to show that, you know, ignoring your feelings and pretending they're not there doesn't make them go away. It just calcifies them.
Gloria doesn't have a lot of use for her husband, does she?
What I love is that Jez knows what the stereotype of that is, but he also understands that this is, you know, Greek tragedy in a kitchen in Blackpool. So he sort of pushes through to more archetypal energy around them, and the stereotype is Gloria's a harridan and wears the trousers, and Bill is browbeaten husband, and that does play out, and it plays out brilliantly, I think, and to a great comedic effect. And Sam Mendes, obviously our director, you may have heard of him.
Yes.
A few things. Sam was very clear that, you know, we didn't want it to tip into that. They had a miserable marriage. I think her husband really loves her.
You made a good point, and that is that this is a very funny play. And you get a laugh early on, Helena, when the very, very patient caretaker asks you if you have any children, and you start bawling, and that actually gets a laugh out of the audience. You're a virgin. And is your alibi that you've just been taking care of your mother?
Gillian has made a decision that she, in terms of how we're all surviving this world, this patriarchal world, Gillian's made a different decision to Ruby and Gloria, and she's made a decision which is, I'm not going to compromise on a partner. I view these relationships as compromises. I can see that it works for you two, and I think she does genuinely. When she says, I think they're fine men, I think she does mean that, but she can't do it for herself.
What I find remarkable once we do meet Joan in the third act is that there's not a hint of self-pity. She's been through the mill for the last 20 years, but where does she get that steel?
I think that we see many glimpses of it in young Joan in the 50s. I think she does stand out as somebody who is off on her own adventure, and she's ready to go there. And I think that exactly as you say about the quote at the beginning where Veronica says, Joan is me, Veronica recognises that in her and she admires it. I don't know whether Veronica is wishful thinking when she says Joan is me or whether, you know, but I think she sees a spirit there that she knows inside herself exists but didn't have a chance to really make flourish in the world. And I think that Joan probably can see that limitation in her mother and thinks, I won't have that. All of this is not enough for me. I'm going to go out there and find the magic in the world. And I think that because she did do that, because she had the bravery to step out and try and find that she is able now at this point in her life, and really it happens in the third act, but she is able to recognize and appreciate that in herself and see that she did the right thing by her own measure.
Laura, a critic on this show actually mused whether or not it was sexist to identify you as Jez Butterworth's muse. How do you feel when you hear that?
I have no objection to it. If anybody thinks it's sexist, they can absolutely have that. But I personally don't find any offence in it. Because
we should say that you inspired, obviously, The Ferryman. It came from your family's history in Belfast, and you both met on the river, in which you co-starred with Hugh Jackman, and that started your both professional and personal relationship.
Yeah.
How do you feel as a muse, as somebody that inspires a great writer?
I think that it is where the inspiration lands is the important thing rather than who is inspiring it. Some of the greatest rock and roll songs of all time have been written about some very ordinary partners. It's not, I love that I get to be a part of these incredible plays, this incredible writing. You know, it's always a gift. I'm also very pleased about the fact that the first play we did together was one where we were not together romantically. So I earned my way into that room, and then I earned my way onto that stage. And so after that, the joy that we found in collaborating with one another was what kept it continuing. But the day that Jez comes to me with a play and says, I don't have a role in this for you, that is absolutely fine by me, because he has to write the things that speak to him. And you know, and in the meantime, I will go off and find the other jobs as well. It's just, it's always a joy and doesn't bring any negative aspect to our lives whatsoever. So long as we're both having fun, then great.
May I say something?
Yeah.
Laura Donnelly, I'm going to say it. Close your ears. Is a force of nature. We all adore each other, but we adore her. And when you see them together, it's really fascinating. I should imagine, you know, how people would like to imagine them because they're one hell of a team. They're beautiful together, but you see the magic sprinkled. It's going both ways. And I always joke that Jez Butterworth is Laura Donnelly's +1. And if you spend any time, and he wouldn't mind me saying it.
It's true.
Ophelia, what were you going to say?
I second that. But I think what I was also thinking as you were speaking is that often I understand why someone may have that kind of objection, you know, that it would be sexist. But I think oftentimes muse has been attached to women that have been robbed of their agency and denied of their creativity. You know, however many muses various male painters have, and they never get to have that creativity, have their name put to a painting. Whereas in this instance, Laura has agency, and Jez has given all of us agency. So if Laura has sparked that creativity in him, he's not just run off and, I don't know, written a poem for himself. And even that would be fine. But he's just, it's inspired something that's been shared with and for women.
You've mentioned, you brought up a good point, and that is the word that he uses in talking about you is dignity, which I think is really fascinating, because you've all discussed the obstacles that you've encountered with your character's obstacles, and yet there's a dignity to each of your characters that is really admirable. How do you maintain that dignity, respectively, when it comes to your characters? Helen, let's start with you.
That's a good question. I think, thank you for saying that, firstly, because acting is often such an undignified profession. So I think it's really, well, it's nice to it's nice to live with dignity in your roles, even if, you know.
Think of Singing in the Rain. Dignity.
Always dignity.
Couldn't do matinee day, eating fried chicken on the floor. What are we going to do?
Dignified arms.
7,000 coffees coming to stage door.
All ordering coffee.
But I think, good question. I think for Jill, dignity sits in honesty somehow, and looking honestly at your life. And she has a moment in Act 3 where she blows up at Gloria that is obviously very important in their dynamic, but it's actually a real kind of dam bursting moment for her of, it's okay to be completely brutally honest about my life and then to start again.
Well, because Jez obviously loves women, and he's talked about being surrounded by women all the time, and that comes across in a character like Ruby as well, and the dignity that she apprises to herself.
There's dignity in her owning how she feels the first time, not making jokes to kind of bat away the emotion, but just sitting in it. And again, it looks very undignified because she is literally on the floor, kind of, crying and wailing, but just a kind of surrendering to that feeling and stepping into it and finding that then she regains her dignity in that because she's not afraid of it anymore.
Leanne, you've spoken to the fact that Gloria is got a tough exterior that's hiding a lot underneath.
What I look at when I see it is for women where life and art converge, who have literally picked themselves up off the canvas, you know, spat a few teeth out on the way, wiped the blood off their nose, and have stood full up and gone, I'll go again. That's why the play is existential. It's about 4 sisters in Blackpool and the whole world.
Yeah. I also think it's something that we were talking about before, about picking up on the idea of dignity, specifically when it comes to women looking a certain way, being prim and proper, being neat, being well turned out, and being nice, being polite. What Jez has given fiery permission to allow us to do is expressing yourself and feeling rage and anger, and is not undignified. Women are allowed to occupy that space. It is not undignified.
It's healthy.
It's healthy. It's perfectly natural. And when it's oftentimes, I mean, I'm concentrating. I'm still, I'm in character. But there are some times when the 4 of us are on stage, and I just kind of think, oh my God, this is rare. Yeah. And the 4 of us are just going at it hammer and tong, and you just think, God, this just feels so muscular. It feels like, I feel like Henry VIII eating raw meat. Yes. Rather than having to kind of sit there like that, you just go.
See, it's when we come off stage and.
You feel like you've got your hands wrapped. It's just.
Yeah. I would think that this play might put a lot of women, mothers, on the defensive. I think mothers are always the first to blame themselves, as Veronica does, as you say she does at the very end of the play. And it's heartbreaking. Her self-indictment.
One of the quotes
that
Jez had swirling around his head was a Bruce Springsteen quote where he said, we're all auditioning to be either ancestors or ghosts. And I think it really does beg the question of any parent, of who is it that you want to be when they remember you. And I think that what a lot of parents, even of grown-up children, forget is that you never stop being a parent. That person will always be your child, no matter what age they are. And I think that it must be very difficult for a parent to look at this play when they have grown-up children and not think about all the things that they've done wrong. But one of the crucial things I remember hearing from an author of a book to do with mothers and daughters was that no matter what age the children are, it is never too late to take them aside and say, I recognize what I did, and I'm really, really sorry. And that will make the biggest difference to any adult child in the world, to just have something like that recognized. And I think that if people do watch this and they think that there is something needs to be recognized, then go recognize it, because I think it's really important.
And is it true for the other side, for the child to make the overture to the parent?
No, I don't believe so, because a parent will always have the higher card. They will always be the higher status. No matter what age you are, your parent will always be your parent, and they have that responsibility.
Because there's that crucial scene, obviously, when Joan is 15. And there is that moment, and we won't give it away necessarily. But in your opinions, does her youth at 15 exonerate her from the decision that she makes?
That Joan as a child makes.
Yes.
She's a child.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The burden then falls on Veronica.
The burden does in the play, but in reality should most fall with the man.
So that's an important distinction.
But this is, I love that, because what's phenomenal about the play is everybody says it doesn't give you a black and white, it doesn't tell you what to think.
Right.
And there are very few irrefutable moral truths in the world. There are very few black and whites.
In terms of the development of the play itself, you were able to play your roles looking at your younger selves with a wonderful quartet of actors playing your younger selves, young teenage selves. What was that process like? How did it feel? Did that help inform the characters?
It did, but I think so much more of the credit for that, I believe, goes to those young women because we were not required to study them or change anything that we were doing according to what they might need. They were encouraged to come and study us and be in the rehearsal room with us and take from our performances what they might find useful and sew them into their performances. So as actors, they all sat there and took that note very seriously, and they all chose little moments where they could replicate things or little personality traits that they could try and sew into the scenes that they're in, and they all did a really amazing job, to the degree that so much of what they had done in that kind of arena I hadn't even appreciated fully until we were many performances in, and then getting to recognize little moments where I thought, oh wow, you noted that and you used it.
Even little phrases, or that Sophia Ali, who plays the younger Ruby, I heard myself being echoed back at me by things she was doing, and I thought, oh my God, that's exactly how I say that word, and she's mimicked it, and it's perfect, but then we would often, in the London run, we would be watching them backstage to kind of keep that closeness, to keep that kind of conversation going.
And Helena, did you pick up any things from young Julian?
Yeah, I have to say, I don't think I've met a more conscientious, exciting group of younger performers. Yeah, and Nicola Turner, who plays young Jill brilliantly, is in the wings at least once a week, watching the third act, which she's not even in, and I suppose it all contributes to a sense of this kind of generational feedback loop where we're all pouring our energies into this cauldron and making this thing together. But yes, there's a particular way she stands behind a chair that I've just straight up nicked, actually. just stolen it.
And young Gloria?
Oh, Nancy Alsop's just the best. She's just they're so diligent and they're so talented and they are so mature. Like, they are just eye on the prize, constantly open to learning and growing and evolving. But I think it's worth saying as well, and I have said this before, there are some jobs where there's just a little bit of magic sprinkled on it.
And the chemistry between you and young Joan is amazing.
Oh,
between
it's
Veronica
so
and Joan.
fun doing those scenes. Lara McDonald plays young Joan, and she is spectacular, and she skirts that line so beautifully between exactly what we were talking about, the Joan just becoming that little bit more mature, that knowing a little bit more about the world and wanting to get out there and experience it for herself, and yet at the same time she has these moments of such true vulnerability and of youth and of innocence, and it's just so beautiful to watch her, and then of course so useful for me, because when I come back at the end of the play, I've watched all of that in the previous 2 hours and I get to take it with me. So it's wonderful.
Unfortunately, we've run out of time. It's gone by like quicksilver. But William Faulkner, the American writer, wrote that the past is never dead. In fact, it's not even past. And this play has brilliantly brought it alive in that way, and you've done a brilliant job. So I thank you very much for participating in this stimulating conversation.
Thank you.
And
Thank you so much.
break a leg, and congratulations to the three of you. Welcome to Broadway. Leanne, Helena, and Ophelia.
I hope giving us a round of applause. Well done, us. Laura, old hat. Third time's a charm.
I hope you have a wonderful run while you're here.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
We are taking a short break. When we return, I'm joined by Michael R. Jackson and Anna Kate Jacobs for a chat about their provocative, funny, and biting new musical, Teeth. We're back. I now have the pleasure of being with Michael and Anna, whose new musical, Teeth, unlocks enough subconscious fears to fill a lifetime of therapy. Welcome, Anna. Welcome, Michael, to Theatre All the Moving Parts, and congratulations on a musical that is as terrifying as it is entertaining and provocative.
Thank you, Patrick. We'll take that compliment.
We should note that the show is about Dawn, a teenage leader of a group of chastity promisers in the conservative Christian church of her fanatical stepfather. When virtue collides with hormonal desires, Dawn discovers she has a weapon to wield, namely a vagina with teeth. from which the musical takes its title.
This blood is a mark of the beast inside. There is a dark satanic collision rising from underneath. Something that hunts with laser precision. Teeth, 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 teeth.
It's based on a Mitchell Lichtenstein film, a 2007 film. What attracted you to the story? Anna?
It was actually Michael who brought the film to me initially. We met when we were students at NYU. Michael was a couple of cycles ahead of me, and we mutually fell in love with each other's work and were looking around for something to adapt or work on together. The movie initially piqued Michael's interest.
Yeah, and I had seen it on DVD, and I was just immediately struck by the sort of collision of religion and sexuality, which were two big themes that I've always written about. I just sort of thought it might be interesting to adapt it into a musical theater piece, and I had an instinct that I wasn't the right composer for it. And I was a great admirer of Anna's, and so I approached her with it to see if the film struck a chord with her at all.
Religion and sexuality certainly, and the collision therein, certainly was a part of A Strange Loop, your Tony-winning musical.
Big black and queer as American Broadway.
So the interesting thing is that, like, I had been working on A Strange Loop. At the point I started working on Teeth, I'd been working on A Strange Loop for about 6 years, like in the form that it was at that time. And it was just a new project, a new idea. I had no sort of sense of what would happen with it, where it would go, whether Anna would be interested in it or anything. Like, it was just sort of like a new sort of idea that had some potential.
Anna, you mentioned that you had a low threshold for horror films.
I do, yes.
So why did you go into the project? What was your impression of the film, and why did you go into a project despite that fear?
I loved the film. When Michael brought it to me, it was around 2008, 2009. And at the time, I think there wasn't as much representation of female protagonists at the center of musicals, especially young female protagonists like Dawn. And I just loved that at the center was this heroine story, and that the main relationship was between Dawn and her body. And the actress who plays Dawn in the film, Jess Wexler, gave such a captivating performance that really was my into the film. But then on top of that, it was so larger than life, and that's really my starting place when I'm working on a musical, is if it feels like it's living in a heightened place.
I think there might be something weird going on inside.
It feels natural to me that there'd be music to participate in the storytelling, and I could immediately see how it would work in a musical theater form.
Had you both been familiar with the vagina dentata, which is Latin, obviously, for tooth vagina? It is an age-old folk tale, myth that has gone back centuries and centuries and traverses all cultures. Had you been familiar with it before you came across the film?
I was not familiar with how culturally widespread it was. However, I was very familiar with it within the context of Freud. And I think when I was like a young student living in Sydney, it was something that friends would joke about. That was my background knowledge.
That's funny. In what way would they joke about it? Just the fear of emasculation?
Fear of emasculation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You started working on it in 2009. Did you kind of realize just how daring it was? Certainly at the time, and even decades later.
I mean, you know, I don't really recall thinking about it in those terms, because it was sort of similar for me personally to A Strange Loop, because I was just operating in a vacuum. And so there was no feedback other than like, oh, it was based on this movie that was kind of a cult classic. So nobody who we were even talking to about it was like, oh, you shouldn't do that, because it at least had a sort of proof of concept. But like internally, I think I just sort of was like, let's just figure out what the story of it is and how it works.
The mix of horror and musicals is rare. I mean, I can't think, there's been Carrie, obviously, that was turned into a musical. I can't think of any others. You've mentioned that the heightened state made it sing. Were there any other elements that you thought, yeah, we can put this into that genre?
I think that when we started talking about our adaptation, the idea of this kind of Greek chorus of Promise Keeper girls came to us very early in the process. And them kind of creating the musical fabric of the piece was an idea that jumped out to us and screamed musical to me. I mean, like the idea of like crazy 6-part harmony screamed musical to me.
It's very, very effective and very entertaining. And then you had the male counterpart with the Truth Seekers, which stems out of the fact that Don has a stepbrother who is an incel, somebody that's just lost and into the deep, dark web. When did the Truth Seekers and the disembodied voice of the Godfather?
So interestingly enough, like we worked on Teeth in many different iterations from 2009 on, and we were always struggling to figure out who's Dawn's sort of antagonist was and what role her brother in the musical wanted to play, because he needed to sort of have his own sort of foundation in order to represent a real conflict with her. And so it took us many, many years, and it was around 2018 that we started to think of him and like a community of other, boys and men who were sort of struggling with how to be men in a world that they perceived as being hostile toward them.
There's the ideology, obviously, of feminocracy and the ideology of patriarchy. And it's the patriarchy that's been handed down from generation to generation to generation. How was it handed down to you in personal terms, especially when you were a teenager, Anna?
Well, unlike Michael, my background was not particularly religious. However, I did grow up in an environment that on the surface appeared very progressive, but underneath there was a lot of gender conformity, and I struggled a lot with that conformity. I think for me in particular, because I was this kind of young creative woman who was highly ambitious and just a little bit too much for the environment that I was growing up in. And it's part of the reason I think I found my way over to New York City, where you can be a lot and nobody worries about it. But this idea of taking on shame because you cannot fall into line with what is expected of you is a theme within our show that I resonate with on a deeply personal level.
Yeah, I mean, and it's a major part of Dawn, and it's a major part of how shame is used to subjugate. Is that where shame came in for you growing up in Detroit?
So, I mean, I guess like going back to my sort of intersection with Dawn's story is like I did grow up very religious, like in a church. I went to church every Sunday for 18 years. I was very involved. I was singing in the choir. I played for the choir. My family had leadership roles within the church, and so I was constantly like reading the Bible and like being taught like how to live and how to do things. And particularly when sexuality came up, and as I was starting to come out as gay, like it just a lot of questions came up and a lot of shame too, because I was sort of, and I don't think that like my parents or anybody in my community did this on purpose, but there was this weird thing about like these like mixed messages about sex, about it's both you need to get married, but also, and like be fruitful and multiply, but also sex is really dirty and bad, and like exploring sexuality is dirty and bad, but also you need to do it at some point, but only under these conditions, and as I was like feeling whatever feelings I had in my own body, I was like very confused. And then as I like would experiment with other boys and things like that, I would feel bad, and then I would like masturbate and I would pray for forgiveness, and like it was just a disaster. And so the shame was like a constant sort of swirl until I sort of left the bubble of that world and sort of came to New York. But then that's a whole other story. But it was a theme that I realized that I had been dealing with like my whole childhood.
What was the tipping point for you? What was the tipping point for you in terms of being able to release yourself from that shame?
So part of it, actually, it's funny, and you should ask, like, came from my cousin went to Interlochen for a year, and she came back and she gave me 2 albums. One was called Little Earthquakes by Tori Amos, and another one was called Under the Pink.
Never was a cornflake girl. Thought that was a good solution.
And Tori Amos is like is a music artist that I revere, and like was such an important artistic and sort of intellectual influence on me as a young person struggling with all those feelings, because she was a preacher's daughter who also wrote about sexuality and religion and like her sort of fighting the patriarchy of the church because her father was a minister. And the more I listened to her music, the more I started to question my own upbringing and the sort of ideology that I was raised in. And that really was like a true gateway for me to just questioning and starting to like probe and to really figure out what I thought. I still had a long way to go from there, but I credit Tori Amos with sort of giving me the early little, she was my godmother, let's put it that way.
Was there similar influences for you, Anna?
The same 2 albums. This is what's so remarkable.
Well,
I think it's also like
go out and get a
Tori
Tori Amos album.
Yeah, especially those 2, Under the Pink and Little Earthquakes. It's so funny because I think this is maybe what initially sparked this relationship, was talking about our mutual love of Tori Amos. But definitely when I heard that music in high school, it was an expression, it was one of the first artistic expressions where it's like, I see myself in that. And my background is as a classical composer. I came to theater via that route, and I was a singer and I was a pianist, and she primarily writes at the piano, and also just the way that music sounded like really deeply resonated with me.
In terms of these Promise Keepers, they do think that purity is the best way to approach sexuality. There's nothing intrinsically wrong with that, is there?
No, I don't think so. It's just that that's the only option that has been given to them, and they're also told that if they break the promise, that there's literal hell to pay. And this sort of constant threat of sort of damnation is constantly hanging over them. And so it really warps, I think, their own sense of their bodies and of how they will be allowed to experience and express their sexuality as they get older.
The pastor wields this sense of shame and power, and it does lead to violence. What is the link between repression and violence in Teeth? Michael?
I think that, it's sort of like science. Like if you take like contents, like a carbonated beverage in a closed bottle, and you shake it 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 and you shake it, it's gonna, like, all those molecules are gonna be like rushing out, and they want to get out and they want to get out and they want to get out, and like eventually it could explode, and I think that the same thing is true of people, is that when you put this sort of repression on a person and you tell them, no, you can't, you can't, you can't, you can't, you can't, it can often build to such a pitch in someone that they can find themselves reacting in a violent way. And not even because they sort of intend to do so. Like that sort of happens toward the end of the first half of our show. Like we had this character of Toby, who has been like really like keeping a tight lid on himself and trying to do what he thinks Father God wants him to do, and then eventually he explodes in a way that might not have happened if there was a more reasonable way for him to deal with his internal feelings and sexuality.
I think our musical is also so much about power, having power or being disempowered. And to Michael's point, because they're existing within this very hierarchical structure, I think the people who have the least amount of power have very few options, which is to sort of resign themselves to that lack of power or to try and gain power and control over others.
There is...
Yeah. That's been like this sort of thing I've been thinking a lot about, is that there's an idea in the world sometimes, I think, especially like in the West, that's sort of like suffering, and literally in Christianity, that like suffering will sort of ennoble you and sort of make you sort of like it'll release you to like sort of a higher consciousness, and not what often actually happens in real life is that suffering can turn you into like a monster, especially if you get one little sort of like hand out of the bear claw that you're in or whatever, that you will then turn all of the oppression that's been visited upon you onto everyone else.
This superhero angle to Teeth, and that is she doesn't realize the superpower that she actually has.
Right.
She then denies it, and then she accepts it. But in the process of that evolution, what happens is that it's violence that turns it on. Is that something that attracted to you about this story, that it is violence is the pathway to the discovery of this superpower that then allows her to, quote unquote, be on top?
Not as much as just seeing this expression of female rage. I, for some reason, was really, really drawn to that. I don't think I see as much of it as I'd like to see generally in media. I watch a lot of reality TV just for that reason. And that was actually what got me really excited about that pathway, less the fact that she was visited on by violence, which I still to this day like sometimes struggle to watch and like really, really engage with. It helps me that I had to make the music for those moments, because that was how I was able to sort of be able to attach myself to them. But when the flip side of the story takes place and sort of the rage bursts forth, that's when I feel a lot of catharsis.
I want to get back to your topic of female rage, which was also something of a topic of the play Hills of California, which we also deal with in this episode. And I was fascinated that in a way, Teeth is an answer, and you avenge first biblical Eve, Medusa, Medea, the Furies, the Bacchae. Was that something that was present in your mind in terms of writing?
Yeah, we definitely looked at different Greek myths, and Eve, the Adam and Eve origin story is obviously huge. So we were referencing those myths and stories as we were writing the musical. Yeah, I think also Elise Allen Lewis, who plays Dawn,
and is terrific,
and is phenomenal, has been a part of this project since 2011. When Michael and I first met Elise, she was an undergraduate student at NYU. She was this young and like obviously disgustingly talented individual. And I think some of the choices we were making also, because she was involved in so much of the development of the show, had to do with working with Elise and Elise's range and the incredible theatricality and excitement that we got from creating this role that hard swings from being this by-the-book evangelical teenager to this larger-than-life monstrous goddess, and her capacity to embody both those things, to be able to sing both those things. So that was also very informative to our approach.
Michael, did you have a lot of sympathy for Medea, Medusa, and these other anti-heroines as you
Yeah,
grew
so
up?
I think like I definitely did, and like, but I think another aspect of it is that as we work on the show is that like we realized that we were playing so much with just mythology and what mythology even is, because there's like there's ancient mythology, but there's also sort of contemporary mythologies, and like these mythologies come from often an ideological place of like just what do you believe? How do you think that like man and woman came to the world? The Adam and Eve story has been a story that I've been fascinated with since I was a child, because it's like one of the first stories you read if you open that book, and it's the story that's supposed to tell us how we all came into the world. And at the center of that story is this idea that this woman was corrupted by a serpent because of her sort of hunger and thirst and curiosity. And this idea that like when he and Adam ate this fruit, they realized that they were naked and they weren't ashamed. Well, what does that mean? And what mythology is that creating? And why is it necessary to put that in this book to hand to millions and millions and millions of humans around the world?
You took some liberties from the film, obviously. You introduced a lot of different characters and different directions that the story went in. One of them was the introduction of the gay character. I think his name is Ryan, which is a friend of Dawn's, who is a closeted gay who comes in at a very crucial moment and establishes his heterosexual bona fides in that way. Was part of the reason to bring him in is that being gay does not exempt you from misogyny?
In the original film, the character of Ryan does exist, but he's not a gay man in that iteration. I was interested in making him a gay character in part to just sort of complicate the story a bit, but also because I'm just always interested in like, the arc that Ryan goes through for me is one of my favorites because it's so unexpected.
But of all the moments in the show that the audience responds to, the moment that usually gets the loudest response is when we discover that Ryan has taken advantage of Dawn. And I have always found that really interesting because I think it really pushes against this deep desire that the audience has for him not to be like that.
And also for him to be a hero. And that like this is actually something that audiences are seeking, and it's another thing I love about our show that we sort of complicate is that you're presented with like the way out of Dawn's problem is if there's a hero and a villain, and like the hero conquers the villain, and the villain is going to be the woman, and the woman, of course, is the person you blame. There's many like themes throughout the show of women being blamed for everything that happens. And I love that like in that moment, we sort of really sort of pervert this like hero villain matrix that the audience is relying upon, just because we've all been ingrained with that story.
Were you concerned that the fantastical nature, especially toward the end of the show, would let the audience off the hook?
Something that I love about our ending, and I think Michael does too, is that it doesn't message to the audience what they should think about what they've just seen.
Michael, you have been incredibly outspoken and very brave attacking ideologies, whether it's right or left, whether it's cancel culture, whether it's black or white. And Anna, this is a question to you because I don't think Michael would weigh in on this, but what makes Michael so what makes Michael so brave?
I mean, there are so many things. I'm trying to think of just one to say.
He's very, very stupid.
Well, because
he has a big mouth.
You've been roundly attacked, on the internet for your outspokenness.
I think Michael is willing to be honest regardless of what kind of reaction that's going to prompt. And then at the same time, Michael is one of the kindest people I know. And I don't know how often I've met a person who is simultaneously as honest as they are kind. I think Michael is a humanist. And I think maybe, in my opinion, part of the reason Michael is so vocal about ideology and cancel culture and all of that is because he wants to see people being full expressions of themselves, and in a culture where you're not encouraged to do that and narrow yourself in order to conform, I think it drives him up the wall.
Well said.
You brought up Tori Amos earlier. I think that in one of her songs, she says, I think
the good book is missing some pages.
How would you fill those pages in?
Gosh, you have to take this one first.
I guess I would fill those pages with, for me, I think that the Bible, and this is something Tori Amos also says, that she thinks that religion should be like a well that you can always sort of go to and be replenished. And I think part of what's missing from it is that sexuality and spirituality go together, and that they don't necessarily need to be institutionalized by like an authority figure. And that like, if you can take the shame away from sexuality and you can marry that to like a spirituality that's also about like your fellow humans and doing the right thing and being, and you know, whether you sort of worship Jesus Christ or not, that like spirituality and sexuality they're interlinked, and trying to sort of tear them apart only is going to create a lot of damage within a human being, in my opinion. That's what I would fill those pages with.
Anna?
I wouldn't fill any. I would take a highlighter and I would highlight, because I do believe these stories are in both the Old and New Testament, but stories of like female divinity and female spirituality. And you know, my dad is Jewish, and so I'm more familiar with the Torah from going to synagogue sometimes when I was growing up. And I know those stories are in there, and I just wish they were more underlined. I think that like what this project has done for me has set me on a course of greater curiosity around the idea of female divinity and spirituality, and it's there.
Well, I think that Teeth is going to send people on the path of curiosity as well. So well done. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a wonderful run.
Thank you.
Thank you. Amen, amen.
And thank you for joining us. We look forward to bringing you more fascinating conversations with creative artists who live only to astonish us. Be sure to download the new CUNY TV app to watch all our shows, also available on YouTube. I'm Patrick Pacheco.